Hello, everyone. I am your resident bibliophile and royal witch, Empress Celestia Libri, and today we are doing an ASMR or ASMR-like reading of Brothers Grimm fairy tales. I have a book that's like the whole collection of Grimm's fairy tales. So I'm just going to start at the beginning of my book and read through. I might, no, I think, it might be safe to say that I'll do more of these in the future. But this is the first one. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope the background sound isn't too loud, but provides like a nice little background sound / ambiance for this. Trying not to speak too loud, but loud enough so that way you guys can actually like hear me. Oh goodness. Alright, and the thumbnail is not my book. That was a public domain picture that I got. My book is not that fancy. My book is just, it's a Barnes & Noble Classics book. So, yeah. Alright, so the first story in my book is called The Frog Prince. I'll take just a quick swig of water here. Alright. And we'll dive right in. Okay. In the olden time, when wishing was having, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful. But the youngest was so exceedingly beautiful that the sun himself, that's S-U-N, sun himself, although he saw her very often, was surprised whenever she came out into the sunshine. Near the castle of this king lay a large and gloomy forest, and in the midst stood an old lime tree, beneath whose branches flowed a tranquil brook. Whenever it was very hot, the king's youngest daughter ran off into this wood, and sat down on the bank of the cool stream. And, when she felt dull, would often divert herself by throwing a golden ball up in the air and catching it, and this was her favorite amusement. Now, one day it so happened that this golden ball, when the king's daughter threw it into the air, did not fall down into her hand, but on the grass, and then it rolled past her into a little fountain. The king's daughter followed the ball with her eyes, but it disappeared beneath the water, which was so deep that no one could see to the bottom. Then she began to lament, and to cry louder and louder, and as she cried, a voice called out, "Why weepest thou, O king's daughter? Thy tears would melt even a stone to pity." And she looked around to the spot whence the voice came, and saw a frog stretching its thick, ugly head out of the water. "Ah, you old water paddler," she said, "was it you that spoke? I am weeping for my golden ball, which has slipped away from me into the water." "Be quiet and do not cry," answered the frog. "I can give thee good advice, but what wilt thou give me if I fetch thy plaything up again?" "What will you have, dear frog?" said she. "My dresses, my pearls and jewels, or the golden crown which I wear?" The frog answered, "Dresses or jewels or golden crowns are not for me, but if thou wilt love me, and let me be thy companion and playfellow, and sit at thy table, and eat from thy little golden plate, and drink out of thy cup, and sleep in thy little bed, if thou wilt promise me all these, then will I dive down and fetch up thy golden ball. Oh, I will promise you all, said she, if you will only get me my ball. But she thought to herself, what is the silly frog chattering about? Let him remain in the water with his equals. He cannot mix in society. But the frog, as soon as he had received her promise, drew his head under the water and dived down. Presently he swam up again with the ball in his mouth, and threw it on the grass. The king's daughter was full of joy when she again saw her beautiful plaything, and taking it up, she ran off immediately. Stop, stop, cried the frog. Take me with thee. I cannot run as thou canst. But all his croaking was useless. Although it was loud enough, the king's daughter did not hear it, but, hastening home, soon forgot the poor frog, who was obliged to leap back into the fountain. The next day, when the king's daughter was sitting at table with her father and all his courtiers, and was eating from her own little golden plate, something was heard coming up the marble stairs. Splish, splash, splish, splash. And when it arrived at the top, it knocked at the door, and a voice said, Open the door, thou youngest daughter of the king. So she rose and went to see who it was that called her. But when she had opened the door, she perceived the frog before her. Then she shut the door with great vehemence, and sat down at the table, looking very pale. But the king perceived that her heart was beating violently, and asked her whether it was a giant who had come to fetch her away, who stood at the door. Oh, no, answered she, it is no giant, but an ugly frog. Okay, hold on just a second. See if I can. There we go. What does the frog want with thee? Said the king. Oh, dear father, when I was sitting yesterday playing by the brook, my golden ball fell into the water, and this frog fetched it up again because I cried so much. But first I must tell you, he pressed me so much that I promised him that he should be my companion. I never thought he could come out of the water, but somehow he has jumped out, and now he wants to come in here. At that moment there was another knock, and a voice said, King's daughter youngest, open the door. Hast thou forgotten thy promises made by the banks of the streamlet, beneath the beech shade? King's daughter youngest, open the door. Then the king said, What thou hast promised, thou must perform. Go and let him in. So the king's daughter went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in after her right up to her chair, and as soon as she was seated, the frog said, Take me up. But she hesitated so long that at last the king ordered her to obey. And as soon as the frog sat on the chair, he jumped onto the table and said, Now push thy plate near me, that we may eat together. And she did so, but as everyone saw, very unwillingly. The frog seemed to relish his dinner much, but every bit that the king's daughter ate nearly choked her, till at last the frog said, I have satisfied my hunger, and feel very tired. Wilt thou carry me upstairs now into thy chamber, and make thy bed ready, that we may sleep together? At this speech the king's daughter began to cry, for she was afraid of the cold frog, and dared not touch him. And besides, he actually wanted to sleep in her own beautiful, clean bed. But her tears only made the king very angry, and he said, He who helped you in the time of your trouble, must not now be despised. So she took the frog up with her 2 fingers and put him in a corner of her chamber. But as she lay in her bed, he crept up to it and said, "I am so very tired that I shall sleep well. Do take me up, or I will tell thy father." This speech put the king's daughter in a terrible passion, and catching up the frog up, she threw him with all her strength against the wall, saying, "Now will you be quiet, you ugly frog?" But as he fell, he was changed from a frog into a handsome prince with beautiful eyes, who after a little while became, with her father's consent, her dear companion and betrothed. Then he told her how he had been transformed by an evil witch, and that no one but herself would have had the power to take him out of the fountain, and that on the morrow they would go together into his own kingdom. Then they went to sleep. The next morning, as soon as the sun rose, a carriage drawn by 8 white horses with ostrich feathers on their heads and golden bridles drove up to the door of the palace, and behind the carriage stood the trusty Henry, the servant of the young prince. When his master was changed into a frog, trusty Henry had grieved so much that he had bound 3 iron bands around his heart, for fear it would break with grief and sorrow. But now that the carriage was ready to carry the young prince to his own country, the faithful Henry helped in the bride and bridegroom, and placed himself on the seat behind, full of joy at his master's release. They had not proceeded far when the prince heard a crack, as if something had broken behind the carriage. So he put his head out the window and asked Henry what was broken. And Henry answered, "It was not the carriage, my master, but a band which I bound round my heart when it was in such grief because you were changed into a frog." Twice afterwards on the journey there was the same noise, and each time the prince thought that it was some part of the carriage that had given way. But it was only the breaking of the bands which bound the heart of the trusty Henry, who was now free and happy. And there you go. That is the first story, The Frog Prince. Interesting little tale. I find it interesting about the prince transforming from the frog back into human form. And they make it seem that, like, immediately, like, you know, he was fine with, you know, how ill she had treated him, basically, and, you know, they got betrothed and everything, and it's just like, why would you want to betroth somebody that treated you so poorly, not knowing who you were? I don't understand. But these are old tales, and I don't know if that part matters or not in the story. I just find that part interesting. And I'm not sure how believable it is. I'd have to think about that. But anyway. Alright, so the next story is a tale of one who traveled to learn what shivering meant. Interesting. Alright. A father had 2 sons, the elder of whom was forward and clever enough to do almost anything. But the younger was so stupid that he could learn nothing, and when the people saw him, they said, "Will thy father still keep thee as a burden to him?" So if anything was to be done, the elder had at all times to do it. But sometimes the father would call him to fetch something in the dead of night, and perhaps the way led through the churchyard, or by a dismal place, and then he used to answer, "No, father, I cannot go there. I am afraid," for he was a coward. Or sometimes of an evening tales were told by the fireside which made one shudder, and the listeners exclaimed, "Oh, it makes us shiver." In a corner, meanwhile, sat the younger son listening, but he could not comprehend what was said, and he thought, "They say continually, 'Oh, it makes us shiver, it makes us shiver,' but perhaps shivering is an art which I cannot comprehend." One day, however, his father said to him, "Do you hear, you there in the corner? You are growing stout and big. You must learn some trade to get your living by. Do you see how your brother works? But as for you, you are not worth malt and hops." "Ah, father," answered he, "I would willingly learn something. What shall I begin? I want to know what shivering means, for of that I can understand nothing." The elder brother laughed when he heard this speech, and thought to himself, "Ah, my brother is such a simpleton that he cannot earn his own living. He who would be a woodcutter must stoop betimes." But the father sighed and said, "What shivering means you may learn soon enough, but you will never get your bread by that." Soon after, the parish sexton, and a sexton is an official who maintains church property, came in for a gossip. So the father told him his troubles, and how that his younger son was such a simpleton that he knew nothing and could learn nothing. Just fancy, when I asked him how he intended to earn his bread, he desired to learn what shivering meant. "Oh, if that be all," answered the sexton, "he can learn that soon enough with me. Just send him to my place, and I will soon teach him." The father was very glad, because he thought that it would do the boy good. So the sexton took him home to ring the bells. About 2 days afterwards, he called him up at midnight to go into the church tower to toll the bell. "You shall soon learn what shivering means," thought the sexton, and getting up, he went out. As soon as the boy reached the belfry and turned himself round to seize the rope, he saw upon the stairs near the sounding hole a white figure. "Who's there?" he called out, but the figure gave no answer, and neither stirred nor spoke. "Answer," said the boy, "or make haste off. You have no business here tonight." But the sexton did not stir, so that the boy might think that it was a ghost. The boy called out a second time, "What are you doing here? Speak, if you are an honest fellow, or else I will throw you downstairs." The sexton said to himself, "That is not a bad thought." But he remained quiet, as if he were a stone. Then the boy called out for the third time, but it produced no effect. So, making a spring, he threw the ghost down the stairs, so that it rolled 10 steps, and then lay motionless in a corner. Thereupon he rang the bell, and then going home, he lay down without saying a word, and fell fast asleep. The sexton's wife waited some time for her husband, but he did not come. So at last she became anxious and woke the boy, and asked him if he knew where her husband was, who had gone before him to the tower. "No," answered the boy, "but there was someone standing on the steps who would not give any answer, nor go away. So I took him for a thief and threw him downstairs. Go now and see where he is. Perhaps it may be he, but I should be sorry for it." The wife ran off and found her husband lying in a corner, groaning, with one of his ribs broken. She took him up and ran with loud outcries to the boy's father, and told him, "Your son has brought a great misfortune on us. He has thrown my husband down and broken his bones. Take the good-for-nothing fellow from our house." The terrified father came in haste and scolded the boy. "What do these wicked tricks mean? They will only bring misfortune upon you." "Father," answered the lad, "hear me. I am quite innocent. He stood there at midnight like one who had done some evil. I did not know who it was, and cried 3 times, 'Speak, or be off.'" "Ah," said the father, "everything goes badly with you. Get out of my sight. I do not wish to see you again." "Yes, father, willingly. Wait but one day, then I will go out and learn what shivering means. I now understand one business which will support me." "Learn what you will," replied the father. All is the same to me. Here are $50. Go forth with them into the world, and tell no man whence you came, or who your father is, for I am ashamed of you." "Yes, father, as you wish. If you desire nothing else, I shall esteem that very lightly." As soon as day broke, the youth put his $50 into a knapsack and went out upon the high road, saying continually, "Oh, if I could but shiver." Presently a man came up who heard the boy talking to himself, and as they were just passing the place where the gallows stood, the man said, "Do you see, there is the tree where 7 fellows have married the hempen maid, and now swing to and fro. Sit yourself down there and wait till midnight, and then you will know what it is to shiver." "Oh, if that be all," answered the boy, "I can very easily do that. But if I learn so speedily what shivering is, then you shall have my $50 if you come again in the morning." Then the boy went to the gallows, sat down, and waited for evening, and as he felt cold, he made a fire. But about midnight the wind blew so sharp that in spite of the fire he could not keep himself warm. The wind blew the bodies against one another so that they swung backwards and forwards. And he thought, "If I am cold here below the fire, how must they freeze and tremble above?" So his compassion was excited, and contriving a ladder, he mounted, and unloosening them one after another, he brought down all 7. Then he poked and blew the fire, and sat them round that they might warm themselves. But as they sat still without moving, their clothing caught fire. So he said, "Take care of yourselves, or I will hang all of you up again." The dead hear not, and silently allowed their rags to burn. This made him so angry that he said, "If you will not hear, I cannot help you, but I will not burn with you." So he hung them up again in a row, and sitting down by the fire, he soon went to sleep. The next morning the man came, expecting to receive his $50, and asked, "Now do you know what shivering means?" "No," he answered. "How should I know? Those fellows up there have not opened their mouths, and were so stupid that they let the old rags on their bodies be burnt." Then the man saw that he should not carry away the $50 that day, so he went away saying, "I never met with such an one before." The boy also went on his way, and began again to say, "Ah, if only I could but shiver! If I could but shiver!" A wagoner, one who drives a wagoner walking behind overheard him and asked, "Who are you?" "I do not know," answered the boy. The wagoner asked again, "What do you here?" "I know not." "Who is your father?" "I dare not say." "What is it you are continually grumbling about?" "Oh," replied the youth, "I wish to learn what shivering is, but nobody can teach me." "Cease your silly talk," said the wagoner. "Come with me, and I will see what I can do for you." So the boy went with the wagoner, and about evening time they arrived at an inn where they put up for the night, and while they were going into the parlor, he said, quite aloud, "Oh, if I could but shiver, if I could but shiver." The host overheard him and said laughingly, "Oh, if that is all you wish, you shall soon have the opportunity." "Hold your tongue," said his wife. "So many imprudent people have already lost their lives. It were a shame and sin to such beautiful eyes that they should not see the light again." But the youth said, "If it were ever so difficult, I would at once learn it. For that reason I left home." And he never let the host have any peace till he told him that not far off stood an enchanted castle, where any one might soon learn to shiver if he would watch there 3 nights. The king had promised his daughter in marriage to whomever would venture, and she was the most beautiful young lady that the sun ever shone upon. And he further told him that inside the castle there was an immense amount of treasure, guarded by evil spirits, enough to make any one free and turn a poor man into a very rich one. Many had, he added, already ventured into this castle, but no one had ever come out again. The next morning this youth went to the castle and said, "If you will allow me, I wish to watch 3 nights in the enchanted castle." The king looked at him, and because his appearance pleased him, he said, "You may make 3 requests, but they must be inanimate things you ask for, and such as you can take with you into the castle." So the youth asked for a fire, a lathe, and a cutting board. The king let him take these things by day into the castle, and when it was evening, the youth went in and made himself a bright fire in one of the rooms, and, placing his cutting board and knife near it, he sat down upon his lathe. "Ah, if I could but shiver," said he, "but even here I shall never learn." At midnight he got up to stir the fire, and as he poked it, there shrieked suddenly in one corner, "Meow, meow, how cold I am!" "You simpleton," he exclaimed, "what are you shrieking for? If you are too cold, come and sit down by the fire and warm yourself." As he was speaking, 2 great black cats sprang up to him with an immense jump and sat down on each side, looking at him quite wildly with their fiery eyes. When they had warmed themselves for a little while, they said, "Comrade, shall we have a game of cards?" "Certainly," he replied, "but let me see your paws first." So they stretched out their claws, and he said, "Ah, what long nails you have got! Wait a bit, I must cut them off first." And so saying, he caught them up by their necks, and put them on his board, and screwed their feet down. "Goodness! Since I have seen what you are about, I have lost my relish for a game at cards," said he, and instantly killing them, threw them away into the water. But no sooner had he quieted these 2 and thought of sitting down again by his fire than there came out of every hole and corner black cats and black dogs with glowing chains, continually more and more, so that he could not hide himself. They howled fearfully and jumped upon his fire and scattered it about as if they would extinguish it. He looked on quietly for some time, but at last, getting angry, he took up his knife and called out, "Away with you, you vagabonds!" And chasing them about, a part ran off, and the rest he killed and threw into the pond. As soon as he returned, he blew up the sparks of his fire again, and warmed himself, and while he sat, his eyes began to feel very heavy, and he wished to go to sleep. So looking round, he saw a great bed in one corner, in which he laid down, but no sooner had he closed his eyes than the bed began to move of itself and travelled all around the castle. "Just so," said he, only better still, whereupon the bed galloped away as if 6 horses pulled it up and down steps and stairs, until at last all at once it overset bottom upwards and laid upon him like a mountain. But up he got through pillows and mattresses into the air and sang, Now he who wishes may travel, laid himself down by the fire and slept till day broke. In the morning the king came, and seeing the youth lying on the ground, he thought that the spectres had killed him, and that he was dead. So he said, It is a great misfortune that the finest men are thus killed. But the youth, hearing this, sprang up, saying, It has not come to that with me yet. The king was much astonished, but still very glad, and asked him how he had fared. Very well, replied he. As one night has passed, so also may the other too. Soon after he met his landlord, who opened his eyes when he saw him. I never thought to see you alive again, said he. Have you learnt now what shivering means? No, said he, it is all of no use. Oh, if any one would but tell me. The second night he went up again into the castle, and sitting down by the fire began his old song. If I could but shiver. When midnight came, a ringing and rattling noise was heard, gentle at first, and louder by degrees. Then there was a pause, and presently with a loud outcry, half a man's body came down the chimney and fell at his feet. Oh, he exclaimed. Only half a man, answered that ringing. That is too little. Yeah, I'd say so. Oh, goodness. Then the ringing began afresh, and a roaring and howling was heard, and the other half fell down. Wait a bit, said he. I will poke up the fire first. When he had done so and looked round again, the 2 pieces had joined themselves together, and an ugly man was sitting in his place. I did not bargain for that, said the youth. The bench is mine. The man tried to push him away, but the youth would not let him, and giving him a violent push, set himself down in his old place. Presently more men fell down the chimney, one after the other, who brought 9 thigh bones and 2 skulls, which they set up, and then they began to play at 9 pins, which is bowling. At this the youth wished also to play, so he asked whether he might join them. Yes, if you have money enough, he replied, but your balls are not quite round. So saying, he took up the skulls, and placing them on his lathe, turned them round. Ah, now you will roll well, said he. Halloa. Now, halloa. I don't know how that's pronounced. It's spelled Holloa. Halloa or something. Now we will go at it merrily. So he played with them and lost some of his money, but as it struck 12, everything disappeared. Then he laid down and went to sleep quietly. On the morrow the king came for news, and asked him how he had fared this time. I have been playing 9 pins, he replied, and lost a couple of dollars. Have you not shivered? No, I have enjoyed myself very much, but I wish some one would teach me that. On the 3rd night he sat down again on his bench, saying in great vexation, Oh, if I could only shiver. When it grew late, 6 tall men came in bearing a coffin between them. Ah, said he, that is surely my little cousin who died 2 days ago. And beckoning with his finger, he called, Come, little cousin, come. The men set down the coffin upon the ground, and he went up and took off the lid, and there lay a dead man within, and as he felt the face, it was as cold as ice. "Stop a moment," he cried, "I will warm it in a trice." And stepping up to the fire, he warmed his hands, and then laid them upon the face, but it remained cold. So he took up the body, and sitting down by the fire, he laid it on his lap and rubbed the arms that the blood might circulate again. But all this was of no avail, and he thought to himself, "If two lie in a bed together, they warm each other." So he put the body in the bed, and covering it up, laid himself down by its side. After a little while, the body became warm and began to move about. "See, my cousin," he exclaimed, "have I not warmed you?" But the body got up and exclaimed, "Now I will strangle you." "Is that gratitude?" cried the youth. "Then you shall get into your coffin again." And taking it up, he threw the body in, and made the lid fast. Then the 6 men came in again and bore it away. "Oh, dreary me," said he, "I shall never be able to shiver if I stop here all my lifetime." At these words in came a man who was taller than all the others, and looked more horrible, but he was very old, and had a long white beard. "Oh, you wretch," he exclaimed, "now thou shalt learn what shivering means, for thou shalt die." "Not so quick," answered the youth. "If I die, I must be brought to it first." "I will quickly seize you," replied the ugly one. "Softly, softly, be not too sure. I am as strong as you, and perhaps stronger." "That we will see," said the ugly man. "If you are stronger than I will let you go. Come, let us try." And he led him away through a dark passage to a smith's forge. Then, taking up an axe, he cut through the anvil at one blow down to the ground. "I can do that still better," said the youth, and went to another anvil, while the old man followed him and watched him with his long beard hanging down. Then the youth took up an axe, and splitting the anvil in one blow, wedged the old man's beard in it. "Now I have you, now death comes upon you," and taking up an iron bar, he beat the old man until he groaned, and begged him to stop, and he would give him great riches. So the youth drew out the axe and let him loose. Then the old man, leading him back into the castle, showed him 3 chests full of gold in a cellar. "One share of this," said he, "belongs to the poor, another to the king, and the third to yourself." And just then it struck 12, and the old man vanished, leaving the youth in the dark. "I must help myself out here," said he, and groping round he found his way back to his room and went to sleep by the fire. The next morning the king came and inquired, "Now have you learnt to shiver?" "No," replied the youth. "What is it?" "My dead cousin came here, and a bearded man who showed me a lot of gold down below, but what shivering means no one has showed me." Then the king said, "You have won the castle and shall marry my daughter." "This is all very fine," replied the youth, "but I still don't know what shivering means." So the gold was fetched, and the wedding was celebrated. But the young prince, for the youth was a prince now, notwithstanding his love for his bride and his great contentment, was still continually crying, "If I could but shiver, if I could but shiver." At last it fell out in this wise. One of the chambermaids said to the princess, "Let me bring in my aid to teach him what shivering is." So she went to the brook which flowed through the garden, and drew up a pail of water full of little fish. And at night, when the young prince was asleep, his bride drew away the covering and poured the pail of cold water and the little fish over him, so that they all slipped all about him. Then the prince woke up directly, calling out, "Oh, that makes me shiver! Dear wife, that makes me shiver! Yes, now I know what shivering means." Wow. Oh my goodness. Alright, so that was... what's the actual full title again? I've forgotten. A Tale of One Who Traveled to Learn What Shivering Meant. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get another sip of water here. I apologize if it shows me looking down a lot, so like having my eyes closed. I'm trying to like elevate my book so that, you know, it shows my eyes open. But that's a little difficult because I have to hold it up in the air, you know, and my arm might get tired. So I'm trying my best. Hopefully you enjoyed those couple of stories so far. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the third story, which is The Wolf and the 7 Goats. This one's pretty short. Alright. Yeah, see, it's showing my eyes closed again. Oh, goodness. Okay. Alright. The Wolf and the 7 Little Goats. The first time I said it, I might have not said the word little, but it's in there. The Wolf and the 7 Little Goats. Once upon a time, there lived an old goat who had 7 young ones. Yeah, that's what it says. Sorry. Let me start that over. Once upon a time, there lived an old goat who had 7 young ones, whom she loved as every mother loves her children. One day, she wanted to go into the forest to fetch some food, so, calling her 7 young ones together, she said, "Dear children, I am going away into the wood. Be on your guard against the wolf, for if he comes here, he will eat you all up. He will eat you all up, skin, hair, and all. He often disguises himself, but you may know him by his rough voice and his black feet." The little goats replied, "Dear mother, we will pay great attention to what you say. You may go away without any anxiety." So the old one bleated and ran off, quite contented upon her road. Not long afterwards, somebody knocked at the hut door and called out, "Open, my dear children, your mother is here and has brought you each something." But the little goats perceived from the rough voice that it was a wolf, and so they said, "We will not undo the door. You are not our mother. She has a gentle and loving voice, but yours is gruff. You are a wolf." So the wolf went to a shop and bought a great piece of chalk, which he ate, and by that means rendered his voice more gentle. Then he came back, knocked at the hut door, and called out, "Open, my dear children, your mother has come home and has brought you each something." But the wolf had placed his black paws upon the window-sill, so the goats saw them and replied, "No, we will not open the door. Our mother has not black feet. You are a wolf." So the wolf went to a baker and said, "I have hurt my foot. Put some dough on it." And when the baker had done so, he ran to the miller, saying, "Strew some white flour upon my feet." But the miller, thinking he was going to deceive somebody, hesitated, till the wolf said, If you do not do it at once, I will eat you." This made the miller afraid, so he powdered his feet with flour. Such are men. Now the villain went for the third time to the hut, and knocking at the door called out, "Open to me, my children. Your dear mother is come, and has brought with her something for each of you out of the forest." The little goats exclaimed, "Show us first your feet, that we may see whether you are our mother." So the wolf put his feet up on the window-sill, and when they saw that they were white, they thought it was all right, and undid the door. But who should come in? The wolf. They were terribly frightened and tried to hide themselves. One ran under the table, the second got into the bed, the third into the cupboard, the fourth into the kitchen, the fifth into the oven, the sixth into the wash-tub, and the seventh into the clock-case. But the wolf found them all out, and did not delay, but swallowed them all up, one after another. Only the youngest one, hid in the clock-face, he did not discover. When the wolf had satisfied his appetite, he dragged himself out, and laying down upon the green meadow under a tree, went fast asleep. Soon after, the old goat came home out of the forest. Ah, what a sight she saw! The hut door stood wide open. The table, stools, and benches were overturned. The wash-tub was broken to pieces, and the sheets and pillows pulled off the bed. She sought her children, but could not find them nowhere. She called them by name, one after the other, but no one answered. At last, when she came to the name of the youngest, a little voice replied, "Here I am, dear mother, in the clock-case." She took her out and heard how the wolf had come and swallowed all the others. You cannot think how she wept for her poor little ones. At last she went out in all her misery, and the young goat ran by her side, and when they came to the meadow, there lay the wolf under the tree, snoring so that the boughs quivered. She viewed him on all sides, and perceived that something moved and stirred about in his body. "Ah, mercy," thought she, "should my poor children whom he has swallowed for his dinner be yet alive?" So saying, she ran home and fetched a pair of scissors and a needle and thread. Then she cut open the monster's hairy coat, and had scarcely made one slit before one little goat put his head out, and as she cut further, out jumped one after another, all 6 still alive, and without any injury, for the monster in his eagerness had gulped them down quite whole. There was a joy. They hugged their dear mother, and jumped about like tailors keeping their wedding day. But the old mother said, "Go and pick up at once some large stones, that we may fill the monster's stomach while he lies fast asleep." So the 7 little goats dragged up in great haste a pile of stones, and put them in the wolf's stomach, as many as they could bring, and then the old mother went, and looking at him in a great hurry, saw that he was still insensible, and did not stir, and so she sewed up the slit. When the wolf at last woke up, he raised himself upon his legs, and because the stones which were lying in his stomach made him feel thirsty, he went to a brook in order to drink. But as he went along, rolling from side to side, the stones began to tumble about in his body, and he called out, What rattles against my poor bones? Not little goats, I think, but only big stones." And when the wolf came to the brook, he stooped down to drink, and the heavy stones made him lose his balance, so that he fell and sunk beneath the water. As soon as the 7 little goats saw this, they came running up, singing aloud, "The wolf is dead! The wolf is dead!" and they danced for joy around their mother by the side of the brook. So that was story number 3. Let me see how long this next one is. Oh, that's not too bad. Let's do this one. I'll get another swig of water here. All right. All right, this one is called Faithful John. Once upon a time, there lived an old king who fell very sick and thought he was lying upon his deathbed, so he said, "Let faithful John come to me." This faithful John was his affectionate servant, and was so called because he had been true to him all his lifetime. As soon as John came to the bedside, the king said, "My faithful John, I feel that my end approaches, and I have no other care than about my son, who is still so young that he cannot always guide himself aright. If you do not promise to instruct him in everything he ought to know, and to be his guardian, I cannot close mine eyes in peace." Then John answered, "I will never leave him. I will always serve him truly, even if it cost me my life." So the old king was comforted and said, "Now I can die in peace. After my death you must show him all the chambers, halls, and vaults in the castle, and all the treasures which are in them. But the last room in the long corridor you must not show him, for in it hangs the portrait of the daughter of the king of the Golden Palace. If he sees her picture, he will conceive a great love for her, and will fall down in a swoon, and on her account undergo great perils. Therefore you must keep him away." The faithful John pressed his master's hand again in token of assent, and soon after the king laid his head upon the pillow and expired. After the old king had been laid in his grave, the faithful John related to the young king all that his father had said upon his deathbed, and declared, "All this I will certainly fulfill. I will be as true to you as I was to him, if it cost me my life." When the time of mourning was past, John said to the young king, "It is now time for you to see your inheritance. I will show you your paternal castle." So he led the king all over it, upstairs and downstairs, and showed him all the riches in all the splendid chambers. Only one room did he not open, containing the perilous portrait, which was so placed that one saw it directly the door was opened, and moreover it was so beautifully painted that one thought it breathed and moved. Nothing in all the world could be more lifelike or more beautiful. The young king remarked, however, that the faithful John always passed by one door, so he asked, "Why do you not open that one?" "There is something in it," he replied, "which will frighten you." But the king said, "I have seen all the rest of the castle, and I will know what is in there." And he went and tried to open the door by force. The faithful John pulled him back and said, "I promised your father before he died that you should not see the contents of that room. It would bring great misfortunes both upon you and me." "Oh no," replied the young king. "If I do not go in, it will be my certain ruin. I should have no peace night or day until I have seen it with my own eyes. Now I will not stir from the place till you unlock the door." Then the faithful John saw that it was of no use talking, so with a heavy heart and many sighs he picked up the key out of the great bunch. When he had opened the door, he went in first and thought he would cover up the picture that the king should not see it. But it was of no use, for the king stepped upon tiptoes and looked over his shoulder, and as soon as he saw the portrait of the maiden, which was so beautiful and glittered with precious stones, he fell down on the ground insensible. The faithful John lifted him up and carried him to his bed, and thought with great concern, "Mercy on us, the misfortune has happened. What will come of it?" And he gave the young king wine until he came to himself. The first words he spoke were, "Ah, who is that beautiful picture?" "That is the daughter of the king of the Golden Palace," was the reply. Then said the king, "My love for her is so great that if all the leaves on the trees had tongues, they should not gainsay it. My life is set upon the search for her. You are my faithful John. You must accompany me." The trusty servant deliberated for a long while how to set about this business, for it was very difficult to get to the presence of the king's daughter. At last he bethought himself of a way, and said to the king, "Everything that she has around her is of gold: chairs, tables, dishes, bowls, and all the household utensils. Among your treasures are 5 tons of gold. Let one of the goldsmiths of your kingdom manufacture vessels and utensils of all kinds therefrom, all kinds of birds and wild and wonderful beasts, such as will please her. Then we will travel with these and try our luck." Then the king summoned all his goldsmiths, who worked day and night until many very beautiful things were ready. When all had been placed on board a ship, the faithful John put on merchant's clothes, and the king likewise, so that they might travel quite unknown. Then they sailed over the wide sea, and sailed away until they came to the city where dwelt the daughter of the king of the Golden Palace. The faithful John told the king to remain in the ship and wait for him. "Perhaps," said he, "I shall bring the king's daughter with me. Therefore take care that all is in order, and set out the golden vessels and adorn the whole ship." Thereupon John placed in a napkin some of the golden cups, stepped upon land, and went straight to the king's palace. When he came into the castle yard, a beautiful maid stood by the brook, who had 2 golden pails in her hand drawing water. And when she had filled them and had turned round, she saw a strange man and asked who he was. Then John answered, "I am a merchant," and opening his napkin, he showed her its contents. Then she exclaimed, "Oh, what beautiful golden things!" And setting the pails down, she looked at the cups one after another, and said, "The king's daughter must see these. She is so pleased with anything made of gold that she will buy all these." And taking him by the hand, she led him in, for she was the lady's maid. When the king's daughter saw the golden cups, she was much pleased, and said, "They are so finely worked that I will purchase them all." But the faithful John replied, "I am only the servant of a rich merchant. What I have here is nothing in comparison to those which my master has in his ship, than which nothing more delicate and costly has ever been worked in gold." Then the king's daughter wished to have them all bought, but he said, "It would take many days, and so great is the quantity that your palace has not halls enough in it to place them round." Then her curiosity and desire was still more excited, and at last she said, "Take me to the ship. I will go myself and look at your master's treasure." The faithful John conducted her to the ship with great joy, and the king, when he beheld her, saw that her beauty was still greater than the picture had represented, and thought nothing else but that his heart would jump out of his mouth. Presently she stepped on board, and the king conducted her below, But the faithful John remained on deck by the steersman, and told him to unmoor the ship and put on all the sail he could, that it might fly as a bird in the air. Meanwhile, the king showed the princess all the golden treasures, the dishes, cups, bowls, the birds, the wild and wonderful beasts. Many hours passed while she looked at everything, and in her joy she did not remark that the ship sailed on and on. As soon as she had looked at the last and thanked the merchant, she wished to depart. But when she came on deck, she perceived that they were upon the high sea, far from the shore, and were hastening on with all sail. "Ah!" she exclaimed in a fright, "I am betrayed. I am carried off and taken away in the power of a strange merchant. I would rather die." But the king, taking her by the hand, said, "I am not a merchant, but a king, thine equal in birth. It is true that I have carried thee off, but that is because of my overwhelming love for thee. Dost thou know that when I first saw the portrait of thy beauteous face, that I fell down in a swoon before it?" When the king's daughter heard these words, she was reassured, and her heart was inclined towards him, so that she willingly became his bride. While they thus went on their voyage on the high sea, it happened that the faithful John, as he sat on the deck of the ship playing music, saw 3 crows in the air, who came flying towards them. He stopped playing and listened to what they were saying to each other, for he understood them perfectly. The first one exclaimed, "There he is, carrying home the daughter of the king of the golden palace." "But he is not home yet," replied the second. "But he has her," said the third. "She is sitting by him in the ship." Then the first began again and exclaimed, "What matters that? When they go on shore, a fox-colored horse will spring towards him, on which he will mount, and as soon as he is on it, will jump up with him into the air, so that he will never again see his bride." The second one said, "Is there no escape?" "Oh yes, if another gets on it quickly, and takes the firearms which are in the holster out, and with them shoots the horse dead, then the young king will be saved. But who knows that? And if anyone does know it and tells him, such an one will be turned to stone from the toe to the knee." Then the second spoke again, "I know still more. If the horse should be killed, the young king will not then retain his bride. For when they come into the castle, a beautiful bridal shirt will lie there upon a dish, and seem to be woven of gold and silver, but it is nothing but sulphur and pitch. And if he puts it on, it will burn him to his marrow and bones." Then the third crow asked, "Is there no escape?" "Oh yes," answered the second. "If someone takes up the shirt with his gloves on, and throws it into the fire so that it is burnt, the young king will be saved. But what does that signify? Whoever knows it and tells him will be turned to stone from the knee to his heart." Then the third crow spoke, "I know still more. Even if the bridal shirt be consumed, still the young king will not retain his bride. For if after the wedding a dance is held while the young queen dances, she will suddenly turn pale and fall down as if dead, and if someone does not raise her up and take 3 drops of blood from her right breast and throw them away, she will die. But whoever knows that and tells it will have his whole body turned to stone, from the crown of his head to the toe of his foot." After the crows had thus talked with one another, they flew away, and the trusty John, who had perfectly understood all they had said, was from that time very quiet and sad, for he had concealed from his master what he had heard. Misfortune would happen to him, and if he told him all he must give up his own life. But at last he thought, I will save my master, even if I destroy myself. As soon as they came on shore, it happened just as the crow had foretold, and an immense fox-red horse sprang up. Capital, said the king, this shall carry me to my castle. And he tried to mount, but the faithful John came straight up, and swinging himself quickly on, drew the firearms out of the holster, and shot the horse dead. Then the other servants of the king, who were not on good terms with the faithful John, exclaimed, How shameful to kill the beautiful creature which might have borne the king to the castle. But the king replied, Be silent, and let him go. He is my very faithful John. Who knows the good he may have done? Now they went into the castle, and there stood a dish in the hall, and the splendid bridal shirt lay in it, and seemed nothing else than gold and silver. The young king went up to it and wished to take it up, but the faithful John pushed him away, and taking it up with his gloves on, bore it quickly to the fire and let it burn. The other servants thereupon began to murmur, saying, See now, he is burning the king's bridal shirt. But the young king replied, Who knows what good he has done? Let him alone. He is my faithful John. Soon after, the wedding was celebrated, and a grand ball was given, and the bride began to dance. So the faithful John paid great attention and watched her countenance. All at once she grew pale, and fell as if dead to the ground. Then he sprang up hastily, raised her up, and bore her to a chamber, where he laid her down, kneeled beside her, and drawing 3 drops of blood out of her right breast, threw them away. As soon as she breathed again, she raised herself up, but the young king had witnessed everything, and not knowing why the faithful John had done this, was very angry and called out, Throw him into prison. The next morning the trusty John was brought up for trial and led to the gallows, and as he stood upon them and was about to be executed, he said, Everyone condemned to die may once before his death speak. Shall I also have the privilege? Yes, answered the king, it shall be granted to you. Then the faithful John replied, I have been unrighteously judged, and have always been true to you. And he narrated the conversation of the crows which he heard at sea, and how in order to save his master he was obliged to do all he had done. Then the king cried out, Oh, my most trusty John, pardon, pardon, lead him away. But the trusty John had fallen down at the last word, and was turned to stone. At this event both the king and the queen were in great grief, and the king asked, Ah, how wickedly have I rewarded this great fidelity. And he had the stone statue raised up and placed in his sleeping chamber near his bed, and as often as he looked at it he wept, and said, Ah, could I bring you back to life again, my faithful John? After some time had passed, the queen bore twins, 2 little sons, who were her great joy. Once when the queen was in church, and the 2 children at home playing by their father's side, he looked up at the statue, full of sorrow, and exclaimed with a sigh, Ah, could I restore you to life, my faithful John? At these words the stone began to speak, saying, Yes, you can make me alive again if you will bestow on me that which is dearest to you. The king replied, All that I have in the world I will give up for you. The stone spake again, If you with your own hand cut off the heads of both your children and sprinkle me with their blood, I shall be brought to life again. The king was terrified when he heard that he must himself kill his 2 dear children. But he remembered his servant's great fidelity, and how the faithful John had died for him. And drawing his sword, he cut off the heads of both his children with his own hand. And as soon as he had sprinkled the stone with blood, the life came back to it, and the trusty John stood again alive and well before him, and said, "Your faith shall not go unrewarded." And taking the heads of the 2 children, he set them on again, and anointed their wounds with their blood. And thereupon they healed again in a moment, and the children sprang away and played as if nothing had happened. Now the king was full of happiness, and as soon as he saw the queen coming, he hid the faithful John and both the children in a great cupboard. As soon as she came in, he said to her, "Have you prayed in the church?" "Yes," she answered. "But I thought continually of the faithful John, who has come to such misfortune through us." Then he replied, "My dear wife, we can restore his life again to him, but it will cost us both our little sons, whom we must sacrifice." The queen became pale and was terrified at heart, but she said, "We are guilty of his life on account of his great fidelity." Then he was very glad that she thought as he did, and going up to the cupboard, he unlocked it, brought out the children and the faithful John, saying, "God be praised, he is saved, and we have still our little sons." And then he told her all that had happened. Afterwards they lived happily together to the end of their days. And so ends that fairy tale of the faithful John. All right. Oh, the next one's a little bit lengthy. Wait, no, it's not. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and do one more. I'm already over an hour here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do one more for you guys. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and call it. And hopefully that'll be a nice length of stream for you guys to have this to listen to have in the background, or whatever. Alright, I will get another swig of water. Alright. Our last story of the day, of the stream, stream, same diff maybe, oh goodness, is the Musicians of Bremen. A certain man had an ass which had served him faithfully for many long years, but whose strength was so far gone that at last it was quite unfit for work. So his master was thinking how much he could make of the skin, but the ass, perceiving that no good wind was blowing, ran away along the road to Bremen. There, thought he, I can be town musician. When he had run some way, he found a hound lying in the roadside, yawning like one who was very tired. "What are you yawning for now, you big fellow?" asked the ass. "Ah," replied the hound, "because every day I grow older and weaker. I cannot go any more to the hunt, and my master has well nigh beaten me to death, so that I took to flight, and now I do not know how to earn my bread." Excuse me. "Well, do you know," said the ass, I am going to Bremen to be town musician there. Suppose you go with me and take a share in the music. I will play on the lute, and you shall beat the kettle drums." The dog was satisfied, and off they set. Presently they came to a cat sitting in the middle of the path, with a face like 3 rainy days. "Now then, old shaver, what has crossed you?" asked the ass. "How can one be merry when one's neck has been pinched like mine?" answered the cat. "Because I am growing old, and my teeth are all worn to stumps, and because I would rather sit by the fire and spin than run after mice. My mistress wanted to drown me, and so I ran away. But now good advice is dear, and I do not know what to do." "Go with us to Bremen. You understand nocturnal music, so you can be a town musician." The cat consented and went with them. The 3 vagabonds soon came near a farmyard, where upon the barn door the cock was sitting crowing with all his might. "You crow through the marrow and bone," said the ass. "What do you do that for?" "That is the way I prophesy fine weather," said the cock. "But because grand guests are coming for the Sunday, the housewife has no pity, and has told the cookmaid to make me into soup for the morrow, and this evening my head will be cut off. Now I am crowing with a full throat as long as I can." "Ah, but you, red comb," replied the ass, "rather come away with us. We are going to Bremen, to find there something better than death. You have a good voice, and if we make music together, it will have full play." The cock consented to this plan, and so all 4 traveled on together. They could not, however, reach Bremen in one day, and at evening they came into a forest, where they meant to pass the night. The ass and the dog laid themselves down under a large tree. The cat and the cock climbed up into the branches, but the latter flew right to the top, where he was most safe. Before he went to sleep, he looked all round the 4 quarters, and soon thought he saw a little spark in the distance. So, calling his companions, he said they were not far from a house, for he saw a light. The ass said, "If it is so, we had better get up and go further, for the pasturage here is very bad." And continued the dog, "Yes, indeed, a couple of bones with some meat on would also be very acceptable." So they made haste towards the spot where the light was, which shone now brighter and brighter, until they came to a well-lighted robber's cottage. Uh-oh. The ass, as the biggest, went to the window and peeped in. "What do you see, Grey Horse?" asked the cock. "What do I see?" replied the ass. "A table laid out with savory meats and drinks, with robbers sitting around enjoying themselves." "That were the right sort of thing for us," said the cock. "Yes, yes, I wish we were there," replied the ass. Then these animals took counsel together how they should contrive to drive away the robbers, and at last they thought of a way. The ass had to place his 4 feet upon the window ledge. The hound got on his back, the cat climbed up upon the dog, and lastly the cock flew up and perched upon the head of the cat. When this was accomplished, at a given signal they commenced together to perform their music. The ass brayed, the dog barked, the cat mewed, it doesn't have an O in there, mewed, and the cock crew. And they made such a tremendous noise and so loud that the panes of the window were shivered. Terrified at these unearthly sounds, the robbers got up with great precipitation, thinking nothing less than that some spirits had come, and fled off into the forest. The 4 companions immediately sat down at the table and quickly ate up all that was left, as if they had been fasting for 6 weeks. As soon as the 4 players had finished, they extinguished the light, and each sought for himself a sleeping place, according to his nature and custom. The ass laid himself down upon some straw, the hound behind the door, the cat upon the hearth near the warm ashes, and the cock flew up upon a beam which ran across the room. Weary with their long walk, they soon went to sleep. At midnight the robbers perceived from their retreat that no light was burning in the house, and all appeared quiet. So the captain said, We need not to have been frightened into fits. And calling one of the band, he sent him forward to reconnoiter? I think might be the word. I could be wrong on that. The messenger, finding all still, went into the kitchen to strike a light, and taking the glistening fiery eyes of the cat for live coils, he held a lucifer match to them, expecting it to take fire. But the cat, not understanding the joke, flew in his face, spitting and scratching, which dreadfully frightened him, so that he made for the back door. But the dog, who lay there, sprung up and bit his leg, and as soon as he limped upon the straw whereupon lay the ass, it gave him a powerful kick with its hind foot. This was not all, for the cock, awaking at the noise, stretched himself, and cried from the beam, Cock-a-doodle-doo, cock-a-doodle-doo. Then the robber ran back as well as he could to his captain, and said, Ah, my master, there dwells a horrible witch in the house, who spat on me and scratched my face with her long nails, and then before the door stands a man with a knife, who chopped at my leg, and in the yard there lies a black monster who beat me with a great wooden club, and besides all, upon the roof sits a judge, who cried out, Bring the knave up, do. So I ran away as fast as I could. After this, the robbers dared not again go near their house, but everything prospered so well with the 4 town musicians of Bremen that they did not forsake their situation, and there they are to this day, for anything I know. Oh, what a goofy little story. Alright. And so ends the reading today, for this stream. I've gone ahead and put a bookmark in this book, and we will continue with the next story at a later point in time. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope the background sound wasn't too loud, and that I could be easily heard. Hopefully my voice wasn't too loud and was ASMR-like enough. Maybe if you listen to this, as a VOD, you can let me know in the comments. Other than that, tomorrow is Saturday. I don't have anything going on. I will try to get a schedule out probably Sunday. On that note, I won't be streaming Sunday either. I will probably be back Monday. So just keep an eye out for my schedule. I've been posting it on X. I might start posting it on YouTube as well. Just, to have multiple places to have my schedule in case there are people that don't have an X account. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Have a wonderful weekend, whatever you're doing. And I will see you guys next week. I don't know what yet. I don't know what I'm doing Monday. But keep an eye on the schedule so that way you can find out. Alright. Bye.